Welcome everyone to Male Fuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about the Pitt episode 4 from season 1. This is 10 a.m. Simple title. This is a Patreon sponsored review, so thank you very much to Allison for picking the show. And we have another list of medical emergencies. We've got a couple of things still lingering from previous episodes. I mean, arguably the two biggest, most focused on things from the past two episodes are still taking a lot of focus in this one. Primarily the brother sister who are kind of accepting that their father is dying. They accepted that last episode. That was kind of the big dramatic ending. And then this episode's kind of the waiting for him to die and them saying their final words. And it gets a lot of time. There's a lot of like them not knowing what to say, the sister being very quiet while the brother talks to him a lot. We find out that the old man, that is, we find out that he used to work on like the Mr. Rogers show. He helped building the sets and doing like the design and all that kind of stuff. And the big dramatic plot of this storyline kind of came from the sister, the daughter of him. Kind of eventually when she opens up, she admits that she used to feel a little ashamed that her dad had a job like that it was like this fun, silly thing and not something serious like other people's parents. But now she sees the value of it, and that the world needed him to be who he was, and it was a whole kind of tearjerkery thing. And it's fairly well done. This kind of comes up because the room that they put him in for him to spend his final hours in has sort of like cartoons on the wall. There's like some cartoon foxes and things. Clearly, it's a room that's often, I assume, is used for children or something like that. And that's what makes the brother say, oh, this is kind of perfect in a way when you think about it, given what he used to do for a living. And that's kind of what leads us down that path. Perhaps the more interesting thing, I think, for us, the audience, is that this actually makes Robbie have a little PTSD flashback where he's once again thinking about, this day a few years ago where he's in the hazmat style suit and he's losing a patient on the bed. Clearly a traumatic day for him. So yeah, we still have so much to learn about what happened that day. We had that one little flashback at the end of episode 1 that kind of went into episode 2, and then this is the first time it's kind of really been brought up again since. I did laugh though, because when he leaves to like sort of catch his breath and he goes to hide in the bathroom so he can just kind of have a little, I'll call it a minor panic attack, where he's just sort of breathing and he can finally let the composure go, the demeanor. And then he kind of like realizes, oh yeah, I need to piss, because that was a big plot point last episode, is he kept trying to go for a piss and he couldn't. So he sees the toilet, he goes over to it, and he was desperate to go. And this is something the most men probably recognize, is when you put your hand on the wall to lean forward to just let it unleash. Like you're almost like you're going to collapse at the sheer like just relief of it finally happening. So that gave me a chuckle, because I was actually thinking for a little bit before that, wait, did he go for a piss like when he was off camera, between the episodes or between scenes? And then this answered that. He finally got that release. So yeah, I mean, I think this is a sweet enough plotline. I'll admit I'm a little surprised how much it took up of this episode still. I kind of thought the dramatic point of them accepting he was going to die at the end of the last episode would be more or less the ending. I'm not surprised to see them at all, but I was kind of surprised that it still felt like the plot that maybe got the most runtime. I'd have to actually check with like a stopwatch, and I don't care that much, but it felt like it was still one of the primary plot threads we were focusing on throughout the episode. And that may be a conscious choice. They want to focus on the human side of this, of losing someone, like finding out that your parent is dying is one thing, but also the letting go of the parent and kind of those final moments. Clearly the show wants to put that on display as well, and that's not a bad thing, but it definitely wasn't what I was expecting in terms of just like how much time we were still going to give those two characters. But yeah, he does pass away. Although they don't actually use that as the end of the episode like you think they might. The flatline and Robbie checking his pulse and that, and it's like clear that it's finally over. They actually do a cliffhanger instead, probably because they ended the last episode on not only this plot thread, but they ended it on like a poignant kind of like sad acceptance. And this is kind of, it's not the same beat again. It's obviously a very definitive ending to the whole thing, but it would be kind of a similar point to end an episode on, which is the sad acceptance that he's now gone. So I understand why they went out of their way to give us a more dramatic cliffhanger for this episode, which is just basically that someone in the waiting room starts having something like a seizure or something else. I don't know. We don't get a lot of detail. We just see him acting out and people are freaking out and Mikai's shouting for a stretcher or whatever. So, they kind of end on this dramatic thing instead of the somber like they did last time, which, is just them. I mean, maybe I'll notice a pattern of them sort of going backwards and forwards between more heartfelt endings and more kind of like, dun dun dun, will this person make it kind of endings. So that was the one plot line from the previous episodes that was still kind of here for a good bit. The other one, of course, is the 18-year-old who is effectively dead, or is dying, he's brain dead. Admittedly, there's less of like the parents in this episode, although they do have one big pivotal scene. It focuses a bit more towards the other girl that came in last episode that knew this kid, who kind of get into a little bit of a fight with the dad last episode, where she's just feeling guilty about what she said to him, and kind of like opening up a little bit to a couple of the doctors. If I remember correctly, I want to say it's Samira, and then what student was it that was in the scene? It was one of the ladies. There's not a lot of Whittaker this episode. Whittaker has one flush of of a scene in this episode. It must be Santos. It must be, because Santos definitely gets the most out of all the young characters this episode, because she kind of has a couple of things here, and I think this is the scene, where she kind of like almost like agitates the patient a little bit with some of the things she says. That said, though, my mind's kind of like thinking, could it have been some? No, I think it was Santos, because the whole thing afterwards is that Samira pulls her aside and says, "Hey, like, use I statements. Don't say you did this or you need to do this." It puts them on this defensive and makes them, you were making her more agitated. She kind of like jumps in and critiques her bedside manner, if you will. And it's not the last time that Santos makes a mistake this episode. She also orders something for a patient, which was just a mistake. And if she'd run it by one of the, the senior doctors, they would have flat out just said, no, that's the wrong choice for this reason. But she ordered something and it, almost got someone killed. Like, they caught it in time. It's not like it was like the last like possible second where things were going to go bad, but they're really trying to hit home to her that she made a big mistake here and she shouldn't have just ordered this without the oversight of someone else. I mean, that's why she's still a student doctor, because she still needs to have all this stuff corroborated. And even the doctors themselves, you see it a lot in the episodes where, like even the trained full, time doctors still like look over to Robbie and just say what they're suggesting, so that if, a second person can corroborate and say, yeah, that's the best choice, because, anyone can make a mistake. And that's why in these like tight situations where they're running against the clock, they have to make these big dramatic decisions quickly to save someone's lives. It's good to have a second expert opinion on hand to just catch out if you don't think of something or whatever it may be. But Santos makes a mistake and she admits by the end that she has a lot to learn. Because even when she's talking to Samira points out that even their conversation, it feels like she's being combative in just kind of subtle ways, and that she has to learn to not have that tone in her voice. And to be fair, I do think that fits with the writing of her character throughout the episodes, even with the other student doctors, where, she keeps, she's had those little spats with the others where she's had to kind of like apologize and say, hey, we're cool, I'm going to call you Crash because we're friends. But, her go-to attitude with everyone is to be kind of a shit with them, even if it's meant in a friendly way. It's kind of how she operates, and we kind of see how that bleeds into everything else. That said, though, they kind of set up that one of the doctors, not one of the main ones that we spend a lot of time with, but one of them might have a crush on her, because they kind of stick up for her and say that, oh, it's a honest rookie mistake. Because there's a previous scene where the patient even says, I think she likes you. And she just kind of shrugs it off. But then she sticks up for her in the other scene where everyone else is grilling her, basically, and saying, you made a mistake, you effed up, you almost got this guy killed. So maybe they're teasing something there, whatever. But anyway, so I spiraled out of the girl who took the Xanax into Santos because it was kind of connected there. But to go back to her, she ultimately is fine. She's sort of warned against taking anything else. unless it's prescribed, because you never know what's in it or where it came from. Solid advice for the record. But her parents, arrive, and she's told she can be taken home, and she got lucky. They really emphasize that. We see that she got lucky. We literally have the other person who took something brain dead. She is very lucky to be alive. But the big scene, and arguably I would say the biggest dramatic scene of the whole episode, is when she's walking out with her parents. They're actually moving the brain dead boy to a different room, and they walk past her, and she makes the choice after a few more steps to run after and speak to the parents, and she apologizes to to the dad for what she said, and basically just kind of explains that he was just trying to be nice because someone said someone has Xanax and it can help keep us up because we're trying to study. Not that it would really matter in the grand scheme of things, but she says at one point, we're not people who do drugs, and I kind of believe her. It doesn't, it seems like that's maybe part of why this is such a shock, is that it's not even the type of world that they're typically in, this particular group of characters. But she's like, hey, your son was just trying to be nice by going to get them because other people wanted them, and he ended up wrapped up in this. But she's basically kind of emphasizing that he was a good person, and that if she can do anything for them, she's, here's my number, here's my email, like, reach out. And it kind of mends the wound a little bit. It's not this ultra happy thing. Obviously, they're still losing their son. But the dad doesn't yell at her at the end of this scene. Like, he kind of just says, "Hey, you should go with your parents." But it kind of feels like, cooler heads are starting to prevail, and I think at the very least there's some respect earned here because he sees her trying to reach out and do the right thing. There's not a lot of right things to do in this situation, but she's kind of like trying, and I think he recognizes that. I think the mother, who didn't even know who she was, seems to recognize that during the scene as well. And even some of the medical staff are standing around kind of watching some of this conversation as well. And it feels like they're all kind of taking note, because it seems like, obviously every day they're used to people coming in here and either being saved or dying, and the sadness that comes with that. This moment of her reaching out to these people and trying to kind of build a bridge after being somewhat related to why their son is dead seems like it's probably something that's quite unique even in this situation. That they probably wouldn't be here at the same time most of the time, but on top of that, like, it feels like a real human moment of her trying to do the right thing, which is maybe more uplifting to a lot of these doctors compared to what they normally see or get sprayed with. As we get to Whittaker, there's a running thing throughout the episode of this guy who they keep calling the Kraken, who's someone who is like, I think they say he's like some sort of junkie or like an addict of some kind, and he's just freaking out, he's yelling, and they've got him in a room with restraints, and they don't want to go in. But they have to go in and give him a shot. So there's a whole thing where they have to arrange a bunch of different doctors or nurses to go in and pin him down. And Whittaker's the one who's brought over and is told that he has to actually do the injection. And he's like, sure. But when they run in and pin him, this guy has got his dick out and he is spraying piss right at Whittaker. He gets covered. So for the second time, and I think as many episodes, I think that was last episode, he had to get his new scrubs. He's been covered in something, this time way more disgusting, because it's piss. So I don't know if this is going to be a running gag where Whittaker gets covered in something and has to change his scrubs. But I did get a little chuckle afterwards where one of the other nurses or doctors like says to him, "Hey, do you want me to come with you and help you get new scrubs?" And he just kind of goes, "Oh, thanks for the offer," but like he knows he's learned how to do it, which is pretty funny to me. So yeah, that's all you get at Whittaker. I mean, Whittaker got a lot of attention the last two episodes, so I think it was completely understandable that they kind of just have him for one little bit here and just to keep him in the loop, keep him in the rotation. But we're focusing mainly out of the young characters. It's Santos who gets the lion's share of the runtime on this episode. So other than those big cases that have still been going from the previous episodes, there's a number of other ones in here and just little small moments. Mateo probably gets the biggest moment he's had yet when he's treating a patient who ends up being very racist to him and says, "Hey, this place is like a third world country. Does it remind you of home?" And it's just kind of this, this asshole is pissed off that he's been waiting for too long, and he's mad that he has to go back to the waiting room. So he's out there. They do a thing as well where we kind of see a couple of people in the waiting room who end up being brought in as patients later in the episode, which I think is interesting because obviously they're talking at one point about how long they might have to wait, and someone says they've been here for 4 hours, someone says they've been here for 7 hours. And I thought because of the format of the show, that means that this guy who's angry might be called in to be treated in like 6 episodes' time, and that would like add up with what the show is doing because it's more or less in real time. The episodes aren't actually a full 60 minutes, but it's close enough. You can kind of there's that acceptable wiggle room, if you will. So yeah, so there's that scene with him. I don't have too much to say about it on its own. It was interesting seeing Mateo actually have like a scene where he's he's not just there to hold someone or do something that a doctor says. He actually gets to react to something that's personally affecting him. So that was a bit more of a character moment for what is effectively a B tier character on the show. And I just mean in terms of like how much time and focus he gets. Like he's been kind of a background character up until now. So it's cool that he's getting a little bit more. It's nice to see. There's the whole ambulance being stolen last episode, and that's just mostly played for jokes where everyone's taking bets on who stole it and where it's going to end up. And we'll maybe see the results of that next episode. I mean, they kind of keep coming back to it, but it's not quite completely dealt with yet. So, yeah, not much to say, really. It's just a kind of amusing subplot, if nothing else. As for the other medical issues in the episode, so there's a couple of very different ones. There's a baby that's brought in with a mother who's terrified because the baby keeps crying. And they're asking a bunch of questions. Everything seems normal. And it ends up being the baby's toe. Something about like a hair getting wrapped around it. And it being something that can happen to babies from their mothers. Like their mother's hair gets trapped or something. And it's basically just causing the baby some pain, and it's not a big deal. They can fix it. And, they're pretty relieved when they see, even though the mother's still freaking out. Not a whole lot to say about that, other than just interesting seeing them treat someone who's so young that they're not even a toddler yet. Like this is someone who can't communicate in any way, shape, or form, and it's just the mother being hysterical for the most part. The other cases include a trans woman who comes in, is misgendered, not intentionally. The lady at the desk isn't like trying to say anything or cause trouble. It's just that her medical record still has the wrong pronouns in there. Which leads to an interesting little moment at the end of the scene where she's treated for a wound on her arm. She gets stitched up, it's not a big deal. I think it's Javadi that was in this scene. I've noticed that one of my bigger problems with this show is that I find it very easy to like forget which young student doctor was in some of the scenes. Not the ones where they've got character stuff. Like when they're talking to each other and they're revealing character stuff, it's very easy to remember which ones were who. But when it's just a case of which one was with the other doctor as they were treating a patient, I find it a lot of them, it doesn't matter too much all the time which one it was. But I think it was Javadi, because Javadi's been paired with Mackay for the most part. And she does this little thing at the end of the scene, because they get to know her a little bit. They talk about her job. She's a Somali, which is, wine expert, basically, for those who don't know what that is. The person who knows what wine to recommend with certain foods and has all the knowledge. And they're talking about it, and it reveals a couple of character things that Javadi isn't old enough to drink yet, which is, obviously makes her go, oh, that's weird. That you're the one patching me up, and you're not old enough to drink yet. And then Mackay, I didn't catch the exact sentence, but it sounded like she's not drinking either, and hasn't ever since something. So possibly related to her past and why she has that tag on her ankle. Something tangentially related to that, not necessarily directly tied to it. But but at the end of the sequence, after kind of just getting to know her as they're treating her, Javadi goes out of her way to correct her medical file and say, hey, I've fixed those pronouns so that shouldn't happen again. And it's just a kind of a sweet, genuine little thing, and the patient thanks her, and Mackay turns around and says, oh, that was a nice touch. Like, it was like just a kind of a sweet, like, for all the depressing storylines we've got on where people are losing their children or parents and they're distraught and they can't handle it, it was nice to have a little feel-good story somewhere in the middle. So that was there, and then there was also a story about a young girl, about 12 years old, I think, who came in with her dad because she has pain that's been building over several weeks, and they're asking a bunch of questions. They do a pregnancy test, which freaks the dad out. He's like, "Wait, why did you do that? Like, there's no way that would be what it is." And part of me was like, "Oh no, is this going to a bad place?" Either because she's so young, maybe someone's done something to her, or even worse, that her dad has done something to her. Turns out the dad's a lovely man. Like, the dad actually turns out to be just this struggling single father whose wife died when the daughter was 6, and this is kind of partially like I mean, this wouldn't have caused what's happening to her, but part of the issue here that's causing him a lot of stress is that he doesn't know how to give advice or fill in for a mum when it becomes issues about growing up as a young woman, right? So it turns so they're kind of weirded out because there's a couple of things happening in her body that normally only happen during pregnancy, but she's also not pregnant. Like, they've tested for that, so it's like, okay, what's going on? So they have to have a look, right up there, and immediately they're like, "Oh, we know what this is. We know what we can do now." And it's not a big deal. They take the dad outside and they explain to him, like, "Do you know what a hymen is?" And he says, "Not really." And I'm glad he did because I didn't really know what that was either. But they kind of explain that it's malfunctioning and doing some stuff. It's something that's used as a part of the reproductive system, but it's it can do this. It can kind of go haywire, and it'll require minor surgery, but it's not like a big deal. She'll be fine. It's not something that it's going to cause lasting damage by the sounds of it. At least that's the way it sounded when they were explaining it. Yeah. So this was a plot that I was very worried about going to a dark place when they started asking certain questions, but it ended up being kind of another sweet plot because it was more about just this is just something that's happenstance that can happen to someone, and the dad is just terrified because he's a single dad who's trying to like be there for his daughter, but he doesn't really know or have answers for everything. And he's kind of like worried that he's failing, and the doctors kind of like get to step in and say, "Hey, no, you're I'm sure you're doing a great job, right? You brought her in, you're having this conversation with us, like everything's going to be fine." I think it was just another case of like, obviously people worry when they have to go and see a doctor or go to the hospital because your mind always races to like, "Oh, this cancer? Is this something fatal? Is this something that's going to change my life? Whatever." And I think this episode gave us two examples of parents who, one of a baby, one of a 12-year-old. And I think arguably what that was doing thematically was kind of like I said that there were kind of feel good stories to an extent, and I think part of the reason why these two were feel good stories because they had kind of simple solutions that weren't actually that bad. They were they're fine, like quick little this or that, and they'll be fine. Is because that sad story about the teenager and the parents losing him and all the drama around that, and this is like and this is obviously a slightly different thing where this is a decision that young person has made at a certain point, and they're not monsters for making that decision, but they made a mistake and it's resulted in something really bad. It's kind of the parent's worst nightmare in a lot of ways. And then you've got these other ones that are like a lot more innocent, where the child's not done anything wrong in either case. They've just had this happen to them by happenstance, but you've got these parents worried, and it's just kind of nice to see the relief for this dad, for the mum of the baby, because we're so busy spending this episode, last episode, spending a lot of time with these other parents who are slowly having to accept that their son is never going to see the age of 19. So I think it's a balance thing. I think it's trying to make it so that the show is not just completely miserable and depressing all the time, because it very easily could be. And maybe that's true to the job in a lot of ways where, yeah, obviously sometimes doctors have to give very, very, very bad news, like the worst news that you're ever going to hear, for the most part, right? But sometimes they get to give good news, right? A lot of the time they get to give the news that's going to bring relief, bring joy, bring whatever it is. So I think the balancing act there is kind of an interesting thing to pay attention to as we go. Yeah. Oh, there was yeah, there was another. Oh yeah, there was another teen actually. There was another parent and teen combo because there's the pregnant girl. This one's just coming back to me. There's a girl who comes in who's 17 with her mother, and they were supposed to be here just before the start of the shift to see the previous doctor who went off. Robbie talked to him, I think, back in the first episode. But obviously, it's like, hey, they're here for an abortion, so they bring up that subject, and we were kind of talking about that. And I think this actually happens a little bit before the other girls, so it's kind of in your head. The idea of pregnancy is like already there. And there's not really too much to this, really, other than just kind of like there's some good acting as they're doing the sort of the uncomfortable, like, okay, so you're here for a medical abortion, or for a wasn't a medical abortion. I mean, it is a medical abortion, but it was like a drug abortion or whatever you call it. But she's they're asking the questions and just because we're not the ones that you saw before, we just have to ask a couple of simple questions. Have you ever been pregnant before? Have you ever whatever? And they're answering the questions, and when she's doing the sonogram to sort of just make sure it's everything's okay and it's safe to give her the thing. Notably, it's Collins who's doing this, who we know is pregnant, and she has a little moment just before the end of it, which felt like the moment that was important to her main characters. But again, thematically, this one ties in with the others. It's a parent coming in with their kid. This one almost the same age as the one who died, and a parent who's helping them deal with a decision that the child presumably made, assuming this was consensual. And there's nothing in the scene to suggest that it wasn't necessarily. It just kind of seems like an awkward, this has happened and it has to be taken care of now. That seemed to be the vibe. And obviously the mother being the one to come with her, it doesn't necessarily suggest anything. Maybe it suggests that, like they've not told the dad. Maybe they're, like she doesn't want her dad to know this happened and that she did this. Maybe there isn't a dad in the picture. That's possible, just like the other guy was a single dad. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean any of this, but your mind kind of gets going a little bit, and it maybe just suggests that at the very least she chose her mother to be the one to bring her to the hospital, if not to be the one to confide in. Either just because it's more naturally comfortable because the mother's also a woman, or maybe specifically because the way her dad is, or the lack of a dad, or whatever it may be. But it's just those little things that are a little suggestive, and just the things that you have to assume that the doctors, as they're treating things like this, also have their minds, and they don't ask the questions if they don't have to. If it's not medically relevant, there's no reason for them to ask why the dad's not here, or if the dad knows, and I mean the girl's dad, not the dad of the baby. That's a different that's a different conversation entirely. But it's not like but I'm sure a lot of thoughts go through heads when you're, because it was the kind of thing when the woman, the trans woman, came in and she had like a slash going down her arm, and she tells the story of how it happened and how it was like a rack or something that split in half, and it kind of, she pulled her arm kind of instinctively, and it made this slash. And that seems to be true. There's nothing to really suggest that that's not the case. Let me make that clear. It seems like she's just being honest. But there was like a little moment when I saw the where the cut was on the arm, and I thought, oh, is that self-inflicted? Was that an intentional thing for some reason? And then everything that's said after we see the wound does not paint that picture at all. Nothing else suggests that. But there is a little moment where my mind just went, oh, is that a self-inflicted wound? And I have to imagine just how often doctors are shown something like a slash on an arm or a wrist and have to like ask the question, like, how, are you making up a story about how you got this because you did it yourself, or it's these little kind of nuances are kind of like just in the head a little bit as like some of the new patients come in and get told certain things. And this idea that some patients that come in are assholes, like the racist guy, that's like an interesting concept as well. It's like, okay, we have to treat this guy, we have to do our best, even though he's kind of a shithead, So I don't know. It's interesting to see them start to explore these different sides of, like, basically living up to the Hippocratic Oath, I suppose, is what I'm saying. But interesting all the same. So yeah. So as per usual, a lot of different little cases juggling around the bigger, more dramatic ones that are getting a lot of time. Whilst kind of just adding a little bit to the characters. And not every character gets something meaningful to their story each episode. Robbie usually does, and then maybe one or two others will get something meaty. Santos got a meaty chunk this episode. Colin's got that little moment with the sonogram, but you know, that was it in terms of major character beats, I think, for this one. But yeah, we'll see how it goes next time. But that is my thoughts on this episode of The Pitt. So let me know what you thought of this one in the comments. Like, subscribe, helps out a bunch if you do. You can support financially over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, or indeed via YouTube membership. Although Patreon gets you all the bonus stuff from the movie channel as well. MailFuzz Movies, where all the movie podcasts live. So go have a look over there, see if you're interested in those. But any support is greatly appreciated. Thanks to everyone who already does. And this is the show. This is the video. Thank you very much for joining. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?